In this watercolor painting tutorial, I've got 8 ways that you may be sabotaging your chances of success when it comes to creating your paintings. Welcome back to my channel. If you're new here, my name is Michelle, and on this channel you'll find all things watercolor, as well as a little bit of drawing tuition, mixed media, even some business and motivation for artists too. Please do consider subscribing. If you click the bell icon, you can get notified every time I have a new video for you. I make at least one free video a week here on YouTube on a Thursday with extra content for Patreon subscribers. Now, although I called this video a watercolor video, actually these tips I'm going to give you go for any medium whatsoever, including drawing that you might be working in. And I haven't just made them up. This is the result of 20 years of teaching real life classes and giving lectures and assessing people's artwork, and also some of my own experiences. These are the things that I see people do all the time that just sabotages their chances of success. It's the sort of thing where I walk around an art classroom and I look down at the student and I think, why are you doing that? And these are nothing to do with artistic talent whatsoever. That means that if you're doing any of these things, or even all of these things, no shame whatsoever, you can correct them without any trouble whatsoever, and you're going to increase your chances of success. So let's get on and look at number 1. So first on the list is trying to copy the style of another artist, and I definitely did this. It seems very logical, doesn't it? If you find someone that works in a style that you admire, then perhaps this is the way that you should work as well, and you can gain tips from them and, you know, do artwork that's similar. But it's usually a disastrous thing to do. Just because you admire a type of artwork, just because you like a type of artwork to look at, doesn't mean that that's what you were meant to do. It would be lovely if that was the case, but often it isn't. Now, many years ago, and I do mean many years ago, I worked as a hairdresser. I trained briefly as a hairdresser and worked for a couple of years in hairdressing salons. Now, if I tell you at the time that Friends was a huge TV series, then you'll know how long ago that was. And if you remember, there was a character played by Jennifer Aniston called Rachel, and she had this haircut, and it was kind of a long layered bob. It seems a very standard haircut these days, but at the time it was something that hadn't really been seen before. She looked beautiful, it suited her so well, and every single person, or at least every second person that came into my salon was asking for the Rachel cut. And you know, you used to look at them and think that you don't have her hair. And you would get people whose hair was really fine, it was a completely different colour, perhaps they were mixed race, so it was quite frizzy. And you know, just this vast array of lovely ladies who would be much better off having a hairstyle that suited their own particular hair colour and texture, but they all wanted the Rachel cut. And you know, you do your best with it, and some of them couldn't be dissuaded. But they were not Jennifer Aniston, they did not have her hair, and they were always going to get some second-rate version. It's absolutely the same if you try to copy another artist's style. So I know sometimes, as I said, it's done with the best intentions. It just seems logical, doesn't it, that if you like the way somebody paints, that you should paint that way too. It's the road to disaster. It never works. At the very best, you'll get some kind of poor imitation of the artist you like. Stop doing it and start finding your own style. And don't try to force that style. Your style will find you. Just practice your painting and your style will find you. Now, the next way you could be sabotaging your artwork is by using poor materials, and I mean very poor materials. Now, I completely understand that if you're a total beginner and you're not very good at painting yet, you don't want to shell out, you know, $20 or however much Daniel Smith costs per tube in America. I dread to think it's very pricey over here. You don't want to shell out for the absolute best materials, but neither should you be using the absolute worst materials. Now, I don't go along with these people that say, well, you must use Daniel Smith and you must use Archie's watercolor paper and you must do this and you must use the absolute top of the range. That's not true at all. But if you're using what you would call in the USA drugstore brands, or over here it would be stationery shops, if you're using those really cheap unbranded materials, and sometimes they make them look very snazzy, they, you know, make up these beautiful names and these lovely logos, and they don't mean anything at all. You need to be sticking to those well-known manufacturers, and you need to be using at least student quality paints, if not slightly higher if you can afford it. You need to be working on reasonable paper. I would suggest, and you've heard me rant about this in other videos, that if you're doing watercolours you need to stretch your paper, and you need to be using basically good materials. They do not have to be top of the range, but if you're using very poor materials, don't think that this won't affect how you're painting. Now, to go off on another tangent, I have really bad feet. Why do I have bad feet? Because I have really soft ligaments. I'm really flexible. I've had trouble with my feet my whole life, and I like to exercise, and I've done running, I do martial arts. Footwear is really important to me. Now, if I had really cheap trainers, not only could it cause me even more problems with my feet, which I've had multiple surgeries on, but it would negatively affect my running, my martial arts training to a huge degree. Materials are important, equipment is important. You have to walk that fine line between spending too much and wasting really expensive materials, buying things that are so expensive you're scared of using them because you could barely afford them in the first place, and the other side of the coin, which is using stuff that is so poor that it is going to negatively affect your results. At number 3, we have talking negatively about your own artwork, about your own skill level. And this is something that people in other walks of life just don't do. You never hear sportsmen, you particularly look at boxers, when they interview them before a match, they don't go into the boxing ring saying to the reporters, oh, well, I don't think I've got much chance here. That other bloke looks a bit big, doesn't he? I'm pretty worried about it, to be honest. What you say affects your brain, and sports people and politicians, they know this. Business people know this. We know that we have to tell ourselves positive things or we don't stand a chance of success. If you are saying to yourself, I'm not very good at painting, I'm rubbish at drawing, I'll never be able to draw, it's something I just can't do, you are negatively affecting your chances of success. Now, I know it's hard if you've just started and you are pretty bad at painting at the moment. It's really hard for you to say, I'm fantastic at painting. It wouldn't be true. But you can stop yourself from saying negative things, and you can frame your learning experience in a more positive way. So instead of saying, I can't draw, I'll never be able to draw, you can say to yourself, I'm not very good at drawing yet, but I'm improving every time I practice. You can say to yourself, one day I'll be really good at drawing. You can say to yourself, I'm going to practice really, really often, and so that I will constantly improve my drawing skills. This goes for painting, for crafts, for anything at all. If you tell yourself negative things, and if you put negative thoughts in your head, and particularly these thoughts that say, I can't do this, I can't understand this, you are going to stop yourself from ever understanding, because we all know how psychology works, and you have just given your brain an instruction to never look at something that you find tricky with an open mind, with the idea that you have the ability to learn and to improve. So stop talking negatively about yourself, even if you're at a very low skill level at the moment, and start telling yourself positive things about your expectations and about your journey into becoming a better artist. At this point in the video, if you're enjoying this video, if you're getting some value from it, can I please ask you to click the thumbs up, click that like button for me. YouTube rewards videos with lots of audience interaction, so if you like, share, subscribe, or leave me a comment, YouTube will push this video out to more people, which helps my YouTube channel to grow, which enables me to make more videos for you. This next one is huge, and it's one that caused me immense frustration walking around art classes and looking at students working, and it's painting from poor source material. So whether this is a blurred photograph, a photograph that's too small, my absolute pet hate, which is people trying to work from a phone screen where the screensaver kicks in every 30 seconds, whatever it is, if you work from poor source material, you have already scuppered your chances of success. I see this all the time on Facebook groups as well, particularly with amateur artists that are doing little commissions. I saw one the other day. I'm trying to paint this dog. I've been commissioned to paint this dog. And, you know, in the photograph, I can't really see, you know, his fur's a bit blurred on this side and he's got his eyes a bit squinty and I can't quite see what I'm doing. But I need to have a good result for this customer. Stop right there. Why did you take this commission? Do not agree to paint something, particularly for someone else, from a bad source image. You are scuppering your chances of success, whatever medium you're using. I've seen people paint successfully from computer screens. I mean large computer screens where they have a still image and they don't have a screensaver that's kicking in all the time. That's a possibility. But if you're working from a tiny iPad, if you're working from a phone screen, if you're working from a blurred photograph, a photograph that just has poor light in it. Years ago, I was commissioned to do a painting. It's actually of the village where I now live. I didn't live there at the time. And the light in the photograph that I was given was no good. It's really helpful with buildings to have shadows and to have sunlight. I drove to that village, this village where I now live. It was about 20 minutes away at the time. I drove over here 3 or 4 times. I nearly got run over, hopping in and out of the middle of the road, trying to get a better photograph. These are the lengths that I went to for my customer, because it's just not worth trying to paint from poor source material. Just don't do it. Pick something else instead. So another one regarding photographs and images, and that's painting from copyright restricted material. I suggest that you never do this. There's no excuse for it. There are so many sites on the internet where you can download copyright-free photographs. I'll put some of them in the description of this video. There are also Facebook groups dedicated to sharing photographs and storing photographs for this very purpose. And in my own Facebook group, I'll put a link again in the video description. I have folders there. We have copyright-free photo shares on a Sunday, and people share beautiful photographs that you can use to paint from. There is no excuse for just grabbing something off the internet and then realizing later on that you don't have the permission to paint it. The same goes with books and magazines. Of course, you can paint anything that you want for your own personal study, but if you start putting these things up on the internet or sharing them, or heaven forbid selling them, you then break the law or risk breaking the law. And you know, copyright law is vastly complicated and it varies from country to country. I suggest you don't go down that path of being on the edge of copyright restriction. Don't even think about painting anything from Disney or superhero movies. You don't have the rights to these images, and there's a lot of misinformation. People say, well, you know, if you paint it and it was a photograph, then it's, you know, you've changed it enough that no, you haven't. You absolutely haven't. You are still breaking the law. And sometimes you might pick something and think, well, let's just practice. I'm never going to show anybody, and it might turn out to be the best painting you've ever done. And then you are restricted. I did this once myself. I copied something from, I think it was an RSPB magazine with some puffins. I did this beautiful painting, and then I was like, oh, I can't sell this because the photographer has the rights to this image. What a silly thing to do. So I suggest you never use copyright restricted materials. Don't be skirting around the edges. Don't be listening to people that say, oh, well, it's blue. If you paint it green, you know, it's okay. It's not okay. Stop doing it. There are vast resources on the internet for copyright-free photographs of almost anything that you could want. And of course, you can take your own too, or work from real life. I suggest that you always do this. You're never going to get to the point then where you've painted something beautiful and you can't do anything with it. This next one is so important. I may actually do a whole video on this subject in the future, but just to cover this briefly, and that is not finishing your work. So there is always a stage, professional painters call it the ugly stage, where they get halfway through a painting and it looks awful. And I have done this myself. You know, you get halfway through, and it's particularly the case for watercolor painting because you are not putting the darks in until the end. So it's going to look wishy-washy when all you've got are sort of light and mid-tones on the paper. You might have made a mistake that you think is terrible and everybody's going to notice. There are all sorts of reasons why you might decide to give up halfway through. I'm going to suggest to you that you never do this. Even if you don't like the painting, if you think it's going to be no good, if you've ruined it, if you don't ever get to that end stage of putting in the darks or putting in the stronger tones, you're never going to experience that way of finishing off a painting. And I have been surprised so many times by my own paintings that I thought were beyond rubbish. I've seen it so many times with my students as well, when I've encouraged them to finish something that they think just they have absolutely ruined. And in the end, they're really, really happy with the results. You've got to go through the process of finishing a painting to understand how to finish a painting. If you think you've already messed it up, you've nothing to lose. Actually, you can be a little bit freer with it. Always finish your paintings. Just to go through the process from start to finish, you will learn so many valuable things along the way. Stop abandoning your work halfway through. So this next one is always staying in your comfort zone. You've got to get out of your comfort zone if your work is to improve. So you might have found a subject that you're quite good at and you can produce quite nice things at. You know, everybody gives you compliments, but are you actually growing and learning as an artist? And sometimes as an artist, and this goes for any walk of life actually, sometimes you have to push yourself outside your comfort zone. Do the thing that you think is too hard, do the thing that you can't manage, because it will teach you. And you might avoid, for example, painting people, and then you try and paint a person and you don't do so well, but just trying has taught you many things and it will have expanded your range quite a bit, even if you don't immediately get a great result. It's really important to go outside of your comfort zone. We have things here in the UK, I'm sure you have them in other countries, called open studios, and certain towns will have an open studios event. You get to wander around artist studios and look at their work. I went to one years ago and there was a lady doing landscapes, really simplistic landscapes in a sort of almost like an envelope shape with a large mount around them. They were very striking looking and really very good indeed. And I said to her, you know, well, do you sell them? She said, I have a waiting list. I sell every single one. And she said, I can do 4 in a day. And I looked at her work, and good as it was, I thought to myself, you have just stopped. You've reached this comfort zone. You've reached this area where you have found something that works for you. You've got a formula for churning these things out and people want to buy them. Now that's a very dodgy situation to be in, because you're at the mercy then of those customers never changing their mind, or that thing that you're doing never going out of fashion, and you yourself never getting bored of it. So always push yourself outside your comfort zone. I myself have done this. You know, I've got the Patreon channel now and people paint along with my own paintings, and because I want to give them a wider range of things, one of the things I've always avoided, even though I've taught drawing on it for years, is painting faces. And I've pushed myself outside my comfort zone. I've done a couple of these now. I did a geisha lady in full makeup. I was so pleased with it. And yet, if I hadn't pushed myself outside my comfort zone, I might have stuck to flowers and landscapes. So push yourself outside your comfort zone, not only with subjects, but also with materials. Try new things. You'll always learn something, and that thing that you learn can probably be translated to your usual work, and you will have grown as an artist. So the last one I've got for you here is probably the most important one, and this is the one that I see scuppering people's chances of success. In fact, if you do this with your painting, you have no chance of success whatsoever. Let me tell you what it is. That is working on top of a bad underdrawing. And even if you're just doing a drawing as for drawing's sake, then if you've got the underneath drawing wrong, then you don't stand any chance of success once you start doing the shading. It's the same with watercolor painting. If your underdrawing is wrong, you are stuffed. You cannot correct this later on. So many times in Facebook groups and on internet forums, I see people asking this question, you know, I'm painting this person's face and something's not quite right. Can you give me some hints and tips? And lots of people come into the comments and they say, well, the shadow on the right needs to be a bit better, and one eye's not quite in alignment with the other. You could just change that a little bit. And I think the hair would be better if you went a bit darker with it, improve the background color. All of these suggestions, none of which address the main problem, which is the underdrawing is wrong. If your underdrawing is wrong, particularly with something that needs to be precise, like a portrait or an animal, you are completely scuppered from the beginning. Never start a painting if your underdrawing is wrong. Paint never improves a bad drawing. I want to repeat that. Paint never improves a bad drawing. It will just draw attention to the flaws within it. So do let me know in the comments which one of these tips you found most useful. Perhaps you've got some tips of your own to share with us, other things that you could be doing or maybe have stopped doing that used to be sabotaging your work. I've spoken a lot about drawing in this video and how it can affect painting. If you do need to improve your drawing, I've got a fantastic video for you that will give you 10 quick drawing tips. You can watch that one right now.